Canada's Trudeau resigns as Liberal Party leader, spelling end to time in power. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has announced his resignation in the face of rising discontent over his leadership, and after the abrupt departure of his finance minister signalled growing turmoil within his government. Trudeau said on Monday morning, early Tuesday AEDT, it had become clear to him that he cannot be the leader during the next elections due to internal battles. He planned to stay on as Prime Minister until a new leader of the Liberal Party. "I don't easily back down faced with a fight, especially a very important one for our party and the country. But I do this job because the interests of Canadians and the well-being of democracy is something that I hold dear," he said. An official familiar with the matter said Parliament, which had been due to resume on January 27, will be suspended until March 24. The timing will allow for a Liberal Party leadership race. The official spoke on condition of anonymity because they were not authorised to speak about the matter publicly. All three main opposition parties have said they plan to topple the Liberal Party in a no-confidence vote when Parliament resumes, so a spring election to pick a permanent replacement was almost assured. The Liberal Party of Canada is an important institution in the history of our great country and democracy. A new Prime Minister and leader of the Liberal Party will carry its values and ideals into that next election, Trudeau said. "I am excited to see that process unfold in the months ahead." Trudeau came to power in 2015 after 10 years of Conservative Party rule and had initially been hailed for returning the country to its liberal past. But the 53-year-old scion of one of Canada's most famous prime ministers became deeply unpopular with voters in recent years over a range of issues, including the soaring cost of food and housing and surging immigration. Speaking in a recorded message posted on X, opposition Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre said Canadians, desperate to turn the page on this dark chapter in our history, might be relieved that Trudeau is leaving. But what has really changed? He said, "Every Liberal MP in power today and every potential Liberal leadership contender fighting for the top job helped Justin Trudeau break the country over the last 9 years. US President-elect Donald Trump has threatened to impose 25% tariffs on all Canadian goods if the government does not stem what Trump calls a flow of migrants and drugs in the US, even though far fewer of them cross into the US from Canada than from Mexico, which Trump has also threatened. Canada is a major exporter of oil and natural gas to the US, which also relies on its northern neighbour for steel, aluminium and vehicles." Trudeau kept publicly mum in recent weeks, despite intensifying pressure for him to step down. His long silence following this political drama speaks volumes about the weakness of his current position, said Daniel Belland, a political science professor at McGill University in Montreal. Canada's former finance minister, Chrystia Freeland, announced her resignation from Trudeau's cabinet on December 16, criticising some of Trudeau's economic priorities in the face of Trump's threats. The move, which came shortly after the housing minister quit, stunned the country and raised questions about how much longer the increasingly unpopular Trudeau could stay in his job. Freeland and Trudeau had disagreed about two recently announced policies: a temporary sales tax holiday on goods ranging from children's clothes to beer, and plans to send every citizen a cheque for $250 $279. Freeland, who was also Deputy Prime Minister, said Canada could not afford costly political gimmicks in the face of the tariffs threat. "Our country is facing a grave challenge," Freeland wrote in her resignation letter. "That means keeping our fiscal powder dry today, so we have the reserves we may need for a coming tariff war." Trudeau had been planning to run for a fourth term in next year's election, even in the face of rising discontent among Liberal Party members. The party recently suffered upsets in special elections in two districts in Toronto and Montreal that it has held for years. No Canadian Prime Minister in more than a century has won 4 straight terms. Canada Prime Minister Justin Trudeau makes an announcement outside Rideau Cottage in Ottawa on Monday, January 6, 2025. Adrian Wild, the Canadian Press via app. Based on the latest polls, Trudeau's chances for success look slim. In the latest poll by Nanos, the Liberals trail the Conservatives 47% to 21%. Over his long tenure, Trudeau embraced an array of causes favoured by his Liberal base. He spoke in favour of immigration at a time other countries were trying to tighten their borders. He championed diversity and gender equality, appointing a cabinet that was equal parts men and women. He legalized cannabis. His efforts to strike a balance between economic growth and environmental protection were criticized by both the right and left. He levied a tax on carbon emissions and rescued a stalled pipeline expansion project to get more of Alberta's oil to international markets. Fewer people died from COVID-19 in Canada than elsewhere, and his government provided massive financial support. But animosity grew among those opposed to vaccine mandates. Flags with Trudeau's name and expletives became a common sight in rural parts. A combination of scandal and unpopular policies damaged his prospects over time. Trudeau's father swept to power in 1968, and led Canada for almost 16 years, becoming a storied name in the country's history, most notably by opening its doors wide to immigrants. Pierre Trudeau was often compared to John F. Kennedy and remains one of the few Canadian politicians who are recognized in the US. Tall and trim, with movie star looks, Justin Trudeau channeled the star power, if not quite the political heft, of his father. He became the second youngest Prime Minister in Canada's history, and rivals said his age was a liability when he first sought office. But he won a sweeping mandate in a come-from-behind victory in 2015. Trudeau is a former teacher, nightclub bouncer and snowboard instructor who has 3 children with his now estranged wife, a former model and TV host.